Welcome. Beauty Within Empowerment Center presents Can I Ask You a Question? On my previous introductory video, I spoke about the things that I'm going to discuss. So I'm introducing to you the new video with a counselor where I asked her certain questions. One of the main concerns or issues that I'm going to talk about today is cutting. What exactly is cutting? And why do people cut? There is an artist by the name of Saiku. He made a gospel song called If My Pillow Could Speak. And in this song, he says, if my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. He goes about the day just having a good time, but when it's time to actually go to sleep and put his head on that pillow, he realized that all the events of the day come back. Then he realized that he has to cry himself to sleep. So there's many of us that walks around all day saying everything is all fine and I'm just living the best life. But in reality, when they go home, they're weeping to someone, whether it's the pillow or to Jesus or whoever you weeping to. So in this issue of cutting, I'm going to ask you a question. Can I ask you a question? Yes, I believe you said yes. So when you go home at night and you put your head on the pillow, what if your pillow could speak? What would it tell me? Would it tell me that you're sad, that you're angry, that you're happy? There's always ways to solve issues and problems. You could speak to someone. You could speak to a social worker. If you could speak to a counselor if you're at school or college, or you could speak to your pastor, or you could speak to a family member, someone. But the goal is to speak to someone about how you're feeling and those emotions that you're having. So if your pillow could speak, what would it tell me? What would it say to me? What did it say, Miss Ramos? You know, my pillow is saying this. It's saying that I'm having self-hatred, self-anger, self-unforgiveness, self-resentment, self-retaliation, self-anger, self-violence, and self-murder. Would it say those things to me? That you're having a problem with your self-esteem, you're having problems with anger, but there's always help. And let's see how we can help this whole situation about cutting. Thank you. I would just like to ask you a question. What do you think is going on with the students today, or kids in general, between the age of 16 to 24?
Well, I think that it has a lot to do with a lack of the proper skills to build their identity. But as with everything, I do believe that there's a spiritual aspect to everything. And for me, I think that that's evident in some of the ways that the students are manifesting what is happening with them. We have a lot of students who are cutting themselves, students that are even burning themselves, students that are picking at their skin. And these are things that are happening that biblically we know are demonic things, and it's just being manifest that way. I think that there is a breakdown in family, the family structure. The way that God designed our families is to have two parents in order for their kids to be able to be raised, you know, in a healthy environment, and to also to be secure in who they are. And I feel like a lot of students don't have that. They don't have a strong family structure. They don't have someone actually pouring into them about teaching them who they are and who they were created to be, and that there is a purpose for their lives and that they have something to contribute to this world, you know. And so we just have a lot of students who are just kind of floating, you know. They're just going day by day. They're struggling. A lot of them feel very alone and that they don't have anybody to talk to. And so for all these reasons, I feel like we have a lot of students who are just lost. So I think those are just part of some of the things that are happening with a lot of our students. And regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of pretty much material things that they have, they're still all having the same issues. Feeling alone, feeling unseen, feeling like they don't have anyone to talk to and share with, just feeling isolated, really. And these are all strategies that the enemy wants to use to oppress young people.
What does Beauty Within Empowers mean to you?
Well, it means that everything that God deposits in us is good. And it means that once we can discover what those things, those gifts, and those qualities that God has given us, once we can discover those things, that can be an empowerment to help us to do the God-ordained purpose that God has given us. Because we can't do it alone. We need God's power to do it.
Why do you think there is an increase of high suicide rates?
Well, as I mentioned before, I do believe that there's a spiritual aspect to everything. And I believe that the enemy's at work because the Bible says that in the last days, God is going to pour out his spirit on everyone, even young people. And in a lot of different places, we already see that taking place. And the enemy is working to stifle that, to try to put obstacles in God's plan, to raise up an army of young people to impact the world. And in a way, young people can actually be a very strong influencer and testimony to even older people. I think that when older people see young people inspired, on fire for God, and doing things for God, that can be a testimony and an influence for even older people when they see young people doing that. So I believe that the enemy is working on destroying that so that it can affect not only younger generations but even older generations as well. But the suicide rate has increased mostly because of this whole feeling of isolation, this feeling of silence. A lot of students don't feel like they have anybody to talk to, and when there are people, they don't feel comfortable saying what's going on with them. Also, I want to say social media has a lot to do with it, because social media has a way of putting an illusion in front to show everybody to show that everyone is happy, and that everything is going well in someone's life. But in reality, that's not the case. People are posting pictures and videos that everything's all good and their life is perfect, when it's all a lie. Because we know everybody has problems. Nobody's life is perfect. But these students are constantly comparing themselves to other people and saying, if this person's life looks so great, why isn't mine? You know, and the only real standard that we should be putting up ourselves against is the standard of God. You know, and understanding that we cannot attain that high standard that God has for us. That's why he gave us Jesus. And Jesus fills that gap, you know. So I believe that a lot of it has to do with just a lack of self-esteem, a lack of self-identity, and the spiritual realm is at work as well.
I mean, that is just amazing, how you sum that up. But if there was someone listening to this, how would you encourage that person? What would you say to them, you know? If you're feeling this isolation and you feel in this way, what kind of words of encouragement would you say to them, or what should they do?
I would say find the courage to speak to someone. Someone you consider to be wise, someone you consider to be able to give you wisdom, and even someone who may have gone through it as well, you know, and try to find out how that person has gotten through that, how that person has overcome that. And I can speak from my own experience. I've had those low times as well. I've had times of isolation. I've had times of feeling very depressed. And if it weren't for my faith, and if it weren't for the fact that I do have people in my life who are close to me that I can talk to, I don't really know where I would be. And I feel that that's why I can relate to the students the way that I do, because I know the shoes that they're in, because I've been there too. So
what are some resources that they could reach out to, that if they're feeling this way?
Well, there are community resources that you can look up online in your particular area. If these students are in school, definitely an administrator, a school counselor. These people are always available. If there's a clinic at the school with a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a social worker, these are all people that the students can go to. They can confide in a teacher that they're close with. Just speaking to someone and just having the courage to say it that first time, because that's usually the hardest thing, saying it to someone the first time. After you say it once, it kind of gets easier after that. But just that first time to say, this is how I'm feeling and I need help. You know, just reaching out to that. If someone is older, like a young adult, if they're in college, the college campuses have resources as well. In maybe their counseling department, some sort of advisor, even a close professor, saying that to them so that that person can connect them to the right resources is definitely what they can do.
What if they're not in school? How would they reach out to someone?
So if they're not in school, there are different resources online, especially. There are certain numbers that they can call, but off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers, but there are certain resources like suicide hotlines, and just different numbers that they can just call and talk to someone. Because sometimes if you don't want to talk to somebody you know, it's easier to talk to someone you don't. And just to let someone else know that, you know, you're going through this and to know that you're not alone.
You know, cutting has been something that me and you have witnessed that with a student that we had.
Yeah.
What is it that the students say the reason why they cut? How does that make them feel?
So some students have told me that they cut because everything in their life is out of control and cutting is a point of control for them. They feel that that is the one thing they can control, so they cut. Other students have told me that the cutting helps to distract them from the internal pain that they're having, so they focus more on the external pain of cutting. Other students have told me that it's a release for them. They actually feel pressure coming off of them as they cut, as they see the blood being released from their skin. And we have to call it what it is. It's mutilation. It's mutilating your body. And it's become a trend. It's become a trend where students, you know, at first they're not doing it, and then maybe they might know someone who does it, or they might see something online about it, and they think, well, let me try it, you know, because I have things that I'm going through and maybe that'll help. And they begin to do it, and it's really terrible. Some of the cases that I've seen have been really severe, where to the point where, you know, with one student, we had to tell her mom that she needed like intensive, maybe residential counseling and therapy, because she would find anything in her home to cut with. Even though mom would take anything sharp that she thought she could use, but this girl would find pretty much anything to harm herself with. So this cutting trend has become really, really bad, honestly.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? What do you think that I might have missed? I know sex trafficking is something that's also big. What are your take on that?
Well, sex trafficking, as a matter of fact, I'm actually writing a letter for someone that I know is involved with that right now, and she's facing some serious charges. And so with sex trafficking, it's just not recognizing that people are human. It's a lack of human compassion. It's treating another human being like they're not even human. That's really what it is. And it can be looked at in the same light that we look at slavery. You know, it can, because the way that one person can enslave another is if they don't think that other person is human. So sex trafficking and human trafficking happens because one person in power does not regard the other person who's enslaved as human. So it can continue to go and go. I mean, it has so many layers, you know. It has greed. It has just using other people. It's one hurt person hurting another person and using that other person for gain. I mean, there's so many layers to it. Those who are sex traffickers, they know exactly who to look for. They know to look for children who seem to be unwanted, children who are broken and come from broken families, children who have a history of abuse, children whose parents are incarcerated or on drugs. These traffickers know who to look for because they know that they can break that person and have that person used for their own gain. So it's just really tragic what's happening with our youth. It's a huge problem with what they encounter. It's one of those problems that you don't even know where to start to solve the problem. But God is able. God is able.
I am taken back by some of the things that you're saying, and I know me and you communicate a lot. How do you deal with those concerns and issues when people come to them? What is your method of release? How do you handle that and not take it home with you? What is some of the mechanism or some of the skills or how? And I ask you that question because maybe, you know, other people who deal with it can, you know.
Yeah. So, dealing with these issues is very heavy, and because I deal with these issues often, sometimes it can really cloud my view or actually make my view very like tunnel visioned for me to think that the whole world is like this all the time. So I have to sometimes consciously tell myself that not everything is bad, not every person has bad intentions all the time. I pray. I have to pray in order for God to give me the strength to keep going and to give me the wisdom to know how to help students. And I have to also remember grace. I have to remember to be gracious to people because I feel like grace puts everybody on the same level. You know, we can't elevate ourselves. We can't put somebody else down because it can be us. It could be us too. You know what I mean? It could be me. It could be, God forbid, my children. It could be somebody I know. It could be anyone. So just to learn to be gracious with people and to see each person as a person, you know. So I think that helps me a lot. Again, prayer. And I'm very thankful that I have a supportive husband who's willing to listen to all the things that I just have to vent about sometimes. So that kind of helps as well sometimes. And again, just, you know, just prayer. Just releasing things to God, praying for some of the students that I encounter, and just believing that God has a purpose and a plan and a rescue plan for the students, as well as for us who deal with these situations as well, you know. And also, for me, I believe that the way that I'm choosing to raise my children will make an impact on the world somehow, right? So the way that I'm choosing to raise my sons, hopefully they will make an impact to change the way certain things are in the world.